We are very excited to have you here with us tonight. My name is Joanna Salinas. I am the Outreach Coordinator with the Waukesha County Green Team. If you are unfamiliar with us, we are a nonprofit located here in Waukesha County. If you're unfamiliar with where Waukesha County is, we are right to the west of Milwaukee County in southeastern Wisconsin. So we focus on all issues sustainability related. That includes things with water, waste, health, land use, and we work with residents, municipalities, organizations, school districts. So we're really excited that you joined us here tonight. If you're interested in learning more about the Waukesha County Green Team, you can visit us at our website, and that address will be down at the bottom. Tonight, I am very excited to welcome Bill.
Welcome. My name is Bill Fuchs. I'm the president of Logical Green Solutions and Ethereal Gold Dispensary. We are located in Waukesha, and we have our dispensary online. It's hemp-derived products, and coming out of background in construction, real estate, automation, energy-saving technology, LED lighting, and recently, within the past 5 years, pivoted to cannabusiness.
Excellent. So as we go through your presentation tonight, Bill, if you're attending here on our Zoom, feel free to type any questions you have right into the chat as you think of them as Bill is talking, and we will have some time to answer all of those questions periodically. So, all right, well, take it away, Bill.
Perfect. So tonight's presentation, we're doing do your CBD products have pesticides or poisons in them? And while that might be an extreme title, it actually can happen. And COAs can save your life. So with that, we're going to dive into that. And tonight we're going to cover what is a COA, why should I care about COAs, how do I read one, how do I spot a fraudulent COA, what could be detrimental to my health, what some samples are of COAs that are lacking, and if I'm not sure about a product or a COA, what should I do? So a COA is abbreviation for a certificate of analysis. It's a full test report on a product. In this case, we're looking at hemp-derived products. The COA is a document that establishes that it was analytically tested by a third-party independent lab, and it meets the specifications for safety and quality. The testing, as I mentioned, should be by a certified third-party independent lab, not just tested by a manufacturer or an individual. And then every consumable hemp-derived product should have a complete full panel test in our mind. And that includes edibles, smokables, vapes, even bath bombs and pet treats. It should be tested completely so you know what you're getting. So a complete full panel test is a report that shows potency, residual solvents, and chemicals, pesticides, heavy metals, mycotoxins, microbials, and other contaminants. Those are all things you do not want to be ingesting. Terpenes are often in there also, and what that is in the world of hemp and cannabis is that's what results in the taste, the smell, the flavor, and also how your experience would be. So first, why should I care about what's in a COA is number one, potency. So potency is the percentage or the how strong it's going to affect you. Potency can be as on CBD, which is not going to be intoxicating or is going to have any sort of relaxing effect, or it can be as extreme as something as a THCP, which is about 8 times stronger than standard Delta-9 or THC that is in marijuana. So just what's going into your body that way. You can tell what the strength is going to be, what your effects are going to be. There's also, unfortunately, you should care about COAs because right now there's a lack of monitoring and testing enforcement because each state really acts as its own little fiefdom in the United States right now. Hemp-derived products are 100% legal throughout the United States. However, the government requires currently only the potency is tested for and reported. And that's the first step in legal compliance, and that's great. But if you consider alcohol, If you're going out and buying a bottle, you really want to know, is it Everclear? Is it moonshine? Could you potentially have something in there you don't want to be consuming? And that's where the solvents, heavy metals, pesticides, mycotoxins, and other contaminants come in, because do you really want to be consuming those? So the other thing is FDA was supposed to come out with their rules and regs for hemp-derived products and cannabinoids in 2019. Still has not happened. And therefore, not only are we working in a cannabis business that used to be very prevalent all the way back to 20,000 BC, it also was something that was mandatory when the Pilgrims landed here. It was mandatory that farmers had to grow hemp. And in World War II, it was actually mandatory. However, now it seems we've lost as much knowledge as we've had in the past, and therefore we're sort of in the Wild West. There's still a lot of companies out there that are questionable, selling smoke mirrors, snake oil, and false promises, which is unfortunate because it doesn't make it easy as a consumer to pick out what you should be taking. So what we're going to go through next is how to read a certificate of occupancy, or COA. And what you'll see is there isn't a standard setup right now by the government or industry. The reports vary greatly from testing lab to testing lab. But there is common information that you always want to look out for, like who is the manufacturer, the grower, what's the description of the product, what's the batch number, when was it sampled and tested, what was the methodology, what are the cannabinoids, potency, terpenes, etc. There should be a pass-fail section that makes it very easy to tell what residual solvents, pesticides, heavy metals, mycotoxins, microbials, etc. might be in there, which there should be none, and what they call is either LOQ, which is less than a trace. The other thing is you want the terpenes just so you know what the results are going to be and what your experience is going to be like. So starting with some sample COAs, these are just some clips, and it's a little bit blurrier than I thought it was when we set this up, but this is just the top of a test report. This is from Adams Testing. They're out of Fargo, North Dakota. And some of the things that are important I have highlighted. It'll have what the product was. In this case, this is just a test report, so we just put test on there. It'll have down the certificate of analysis, which if it does not have a formal certificate of analysis and name, it technically does not comply with the government requirements. It'll have the date sampled. It should have a QR code that you can actually pull up on a smartphone or a QR reader, and that should take you directly to the complete full panel test. The other things it shows what your total THC is. Total THC is the government monitors hemp products that are 0.3% THC or less is considered hemp. Anything above that is considered either medical or recreational cannabis or marijuana. In this case, it's 0.202, so it's very, very easily compliant. And going on to the next, this is a complete report. So this is from Waukesha Labs, and they're out of Tennessee. They work throughout the United States. And the product, can you guys see my mouse, my cursor? Perfect. So the company is Hometown Hero. You can see there's a date here. It has their address, and then it even gives you a pass for all the different things and different requirements or different tests on here, which is really nice from a consumer basis, because if you see that everything passed and you have confidence in that lab, then it's pretty much done. What's nice also here is they have down what the sample number was, what the harvest, the batch number, all the different information that you really need on a detailed basis so you can tell. In this case, they also have page number 1 of 5, which sounds silly, but a lot of lab reports do not include that information. Then they show the total THC, which, as I said, is 0.3% is the max. So this one's well in compliance. And then what's a little hard to read on the screen is these are all the different cannabinoids and the percentages on there. Then there'll be a compliance statement and a signature and a date. That should be on every report. So that's page 1. Page 2 in this case is a test for all of these different pesticides to make sure those are not in there. And as long as everything says passed, and that means that it is within acceptable for human consumption. The rest of the header is the same. Then we go on to the residual solvents, and the reason why that's important is when you're doing hemp extraction and hemp processing, there are several different systems you could use. There can be a CO2, it can be ethanol, it could be butane, or there's actually even water extractions that that have zero solvents and allow the original terpenes to stay into the product. But once again, you can see they have a QR code here. It's really a nice layout, and then it's still signed on every single page. So the page, page 4 and 5 I put on here because that's all those on on page 5. But that's microbials, mycotoxins, and heavy metals. And the heavy metals you can see include arsenic, cadmium, some of the major heavy metals. And then what's interesting on Cage's labs is they actually have another one, which is basically just they put down under filth and foreign material, which I always find sort of humorous that there's filth on a COA. But what that's basically telling you, there's not other contaminants that are in here also. A side note that I didn't put in the presentation, but something that we found was very interesting is when hemp when cannabis is legalized in MedRec in the States, does anybody want to guess what industry is hurt the most, where they lose the most business? Anybody want to type that in chat and just see if they have any guesses? I'll give you the answer in a couple more slides. But just what industry is actually hurt by medical or recreational marijuana being approved? That's my teaser of the day here. Next one. This is another product. This is from COAs CBD. And it's that certificate of analysis. They also have tested safe certified at the top. It tells you that this is the product. It is a 10 milligrams of Delta 9, 20 milligrams CBD line. It is a CBD hemp edible. Everything that we're looking at today is going to be derived from hemp. So there's nothing that's got a higher percentage than the 0.3%. Here's another thing that's nice. They have a photo of the product tested. And then once again, they summarize potency, terpenes, heavy metals, mycotoxins, pesticides, solvents, Listeria monocytogenes. I honestly don't know what a monocyte. I have to look that up, but I know what Listeria is. And then pathogenic contamination also. This one has the potency broken out on the left, and you can see this is primarily CBD, some Delta 8 THC, which is very similar to Delta 9 THC. It does occur naturally in a hemp plant. Majority of it, though, is chemically altered Delta 9. And as on a consumer basis, since we're a smaller group, and I think we're going to have plenty of time, Delta 8 is very similar to Delta 9 in that you can get a head buzz and a relaxation, but it's at a lesser extent. So Delta 8, ironically, is where I started because I had shoulder surgery, blew up my shoulder, and they gave me a choice of Vicodin and Oxy. Can't take Vicodin, it makes me motion sick, and I hated Oxy. It was the equivalent of going out and having too much tequila to drink and then finishing the night off with beer, which is my personal worst hangover ever. It's something that I would not recommend. It did not help me sleep, and I had to sleep sitting up in a couch for 2 months. So went to my surgeon and I said, hey, we're working with growers and cultivators throughout the United States. I've got contacts in the hemp world. What do you think of Delta 8 or Delta 9? And he looked at me, and he's a younger guy. He's in his 40s and had a really good bedside manner. And he looked at me and he sort of smiled and said, while I cannot prescribe these to you, my recommendation is if you do not like the Oxy, to dispose of it properly because it is extremely addictive. And if it's not helping you sleep, he said, I wouldn't start with Delta 9 right away. He asked me, when's the last time I may have I may have smoked, and it was last time I had was in college, so it was a long time ago. He said, you won't have a tolerance, start with Delta 8. Did a lot of research, looked up Delta 8 gummies, found a company that I was comfortable with, purchased one, took one Delta 8, and I slept through the night, which anytime you've had surgery and you need to be in healing mode, sleep is key. So that was my personal experience of how we got into the retail side. So back on the compliance test, sorry for the little divergence there. You can see everything is compliant with 0.23% THC, total THC. It also has CBD, which is good for general health. CBG, there's none detected. That's good for mostly information. And CBN doesn't have anything detected in here either. That is primarily for sleep, but those are the major ones. Then it runs into the different terpenes, which this one is limonene, which is sort of a lemony flavor, and ocimene, which I honestly believe that is an earthy flavor. I'd have to double check that one. Mycotoxins passed, heavy metal passed again. Then we went through a list of all the pesticides here, the resilient solvents, the pathogenic SAEs, listeria. And then that's the end of this report. I did clip it so you could read it somewhat because it does have all the signatures, everything complete on the bottom. Then this is another one by Encore Labs, and this is High Hopes, another gummy. And same thing, they run through a summary, give you the pass, completed, pass test, a little bit different layout. Total THC, they did it in milligrams on this one. And then that's because that's the entire sample. And then what they broke out is this is primarily Delta 8 with some Delta 9. Once again, a whole list of pesticides, residual solvents, making sure there's not any solvents in here. ND stands for non-detectable. That's what you want to see. As a side note, we were at Wisconsin Cannabis Expo, and one of the bakeries over there, we asked for their report, and we got it, and we found out that it had benzene in it, and it was in a pass mode, but we noticed that the percentage of the daily allowance when we looked it up is if you had 3 of their cookies, you were at max for the daily mode. So, and they were CBD cookies, so it wasn't something that you were going to get a high or a buzz off of. It's something I could very easily, because I have a sweet tooth, I would have sat down and I could have easily had half dozen cookies, and I've been double over my dose. So we met with them and discussed with them that, yeah, they really should be going to getting a different distillate so you can get down to no detection to the ND. And then this is the mycotoxins, microbials, and the heavy metals again. So these are all things you want to see, breakout of the CBDs, and then also I have the pesticides again on here too. So now those are good ones. Does anybody have any questions? Because I know there's a lot of stuff on there. If anybody has any questions, if you want to raise your hand, or just actually, we have a small enough group, if you want to just unmute yourself and ask, feel free to ask anytime. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. So how do you spot a fraudulent COA? So first of all is verify the COA has a QR code. They should all have QR codes. That has become industry standard in the last year. By using the QR code, you can just use your smartphone or a QR code reader app. You can just click on it, and even if it's on the product label, on a test, or on a product website, you should be able to go right to that, and it should pull up the entire complete panel test. If it only has potency, or if it's an incomplete test, which we'll show you some in a very short time here, I would pass on that product and get a different product. Review the COA for anything out of the ordinary. We'll have some examples on that. Confirm the results are recent, because we've also found that typically a shelf life is roughly a year. Each manufacturer is slightly different, but we have seen products where they've given us test reports that are 2, 3, 4 years old, and they're not valid anymore. Then ensure the document is an official company or a copy. This is something that, what we mean by that is, unfortunately, in the world of cannabis, which includes hemp, there are still issues out there where people will actually modify reports or take another company's report and modify it. If you check the QR code, you'll be able to find that out. If you check with the lab, you can find that out. Make sure there's a photo and description that they match. That's another thing. And then, I know this is going to sound silly, but double check equations, because yes, unfortunately, there's some math involved tonight. Where that primarily comes in is if they say it has 2,000 milligrams, for example, and they've given a full sample to the testing company and it comes up short or dramatically over or the wrong product, that's another red, it's not even yellow flag, that's an automatic red flag. Make sure you do not take that or buy it. So as you're going through, also look at the limit of quantifications. That's the LOQ. That ideally is ND for non-detectable. Watch out for the words that say THC free. And that's not an automatic no. That's just, be careful, because some manufacturers have been saying THC free, which is what you need for drug testing. And yet, if you look at the COA, it's actually a small detectable amount of THC, which means if you are in the nursing profession, or if you're a first responder, basically, or any other place that gets tested, it could say THC free. And if you don't check the COA, you might fail a drug test, which would be terrible. Ensure that the COA has a batch number and size, because they should be testing every batch number and should show you what the size of the test was. And then watch out for a high THC reported on a COA and a low THC. And what that means is some states require tests only for Delta-9, which is the main cannabinoid that's in marijuana. Other states have total THC, like Wisconsin, where you should have roughly a percentage of roughly, and then this isn't very roughly, is 87.7, but say 90% of it should be THC and the balance should be THCA. So it's just a flag that you can see. And then also, if it does test for flower, etc., or if you're testing for the dry product, verify which plant parts of the plants were tested. Reason being is majority of the terpenes and majority of the cannabinoids are in the flower or the cola, and that part of the plant will have majority of the product, very little in the stems, the leaves, and the sugar leaves. That being said, Wisconsin typically requires the top 2 to 3 inches of flower for testing, which means you're getting the strongest part of the plant. You have to watch out for manufacturers or even other testing labs that accept full plant. Full plant will be blended in, and what it'll do is lower that THC percentage way down. Something else that we do. So if you're not sure about the test report, because these are rather queuing, you could call the lab. You could call Bill Nye the Science Guy. But that's probably not going to be your first choices. I'll give you some other options later on. So what could be detrimental to health? As I said, it's the residual solvents, the pesticides, heavy metals, mycotoxins, and other contaminants are all things that not only could be detrimental to your health, but also will potentially change your experience that you're having. You could take something that should be helping with inflammation, like a CBG, and if it has solvents, pesticides, mycotoxins, or any of these other contaminants, you might have the opposite effect, and it had nothing to do with the cannabinoids or how your body's doing it. It's just what you bought wasn't what you were anticipating. Same thing on this is when you go to a gas station, a C-store, Walmart, a pharmacy, Menards even carries hemp products. If it says it's a hemp product, or it may even say CBD, check for that QR code, and then also check on the label to make sure that the product actually has CBD in it. What a lot of the less than credible manufacturers do is they use hemp oil, and they can say it's a hemp product, but from a health benefit, hemp oil isn't much different than canola oil, peanut oil, olive oil. It's just a carrier. It's very inexpensive for them to produce. So if you ever buy hemp gummies and nothing happens, or even if you're buying CBD gummies and you're like, I could have just had candy for all I know. Check the labels and check the COA, because that would also tell you what's actually in the product. So here's some of our COAs that you look at it and you're like, what is going on? So if you recall last on the other sections, there was terpene profile, there was data in the solvents, this is data in the heavy metals, data in the microbials. When this report was received, when we asked for the product and we looked at this report, what we discovered is someone along the way, doubtful at the lab, most likely at the manufacturer, actually blanked out these areas. Because normally if the lab doesn't test for these things, they don't give you a report that has headers with no data in it. And that was also very interesting. If we're looking over here, there's a gummy jar here that should have specifically what that is. Up in the left here, and I know it's probably very hard to read, it says assorted gummies, strain is assorted gummies, they're ingestible, which means what was tested may or may not have been what's in this container. We don't have a way of doing that. And then when it gets a little bit stranger, whoops, there is the company name, there's no license number, there's no address, it just says San Diego. And then to even make it more bizarre is there should have been a batch number, a batch size, because we don't know what size was collected on here, and what date it was collected. So this, to me, this was an automatic one and out. We didn't even call the lab on this. This is just an automatic. No, we're not carrying this company's product or looking at this product. I would not want to adjust it because I'm not quite sure what we even tested over here. It could have been this. It could have been something else. Here's another one. This is just the top of a form, but it says Omega Berry Gelato. There's no photo. There's no description. There's not a QR code. So this one is another one that I don't know what we're really testing here, and that's something that we would not be considering. Here's another one where they say the product is Bellini. Now, if you look at the name, there's an SN Inc., but the producer name is blank, the producer address is blank, the license is blank, the distributor is blank, and then what gets even more confusing, over here, they're telling us our total cannabinoids is, THC is 0.279. When you go down to total THC per package, though, it says not applicable per serving, not applicable. So we just happen to know that this was supposed to be a vape cartridge juice. And what we're speculating is this may have been imported from overseas, potentially China. And if that's the case, we want to know all this information here. Plus, we also want to test it for vitamin E, because if anybody's heard about the issues with vaping that were prevalent 2-3 years ago, and people were basically having extreme problems with lungs, some people even died, it was because the overseas manufacturers on the black market released a lot of vape juice that had vitamin E in it. And do you know what we're not supposed to do with vitamin E? You're never supposed to inhale vitamin E. It's great for a topical, it's great for other things. You're never supposed to inhale it, is what they found out. And that's why it sort of died. Once they shut off that and went only to legitimate sources, they found out that that whole problem with vaping essentially went away, dropped out of mainstream media. Another thing that's interesting and why it's important is, to date, there has never been a fatal overdose on a hemp or marijuana product. There have been overdoses, but not fatal, unless it was laced with something else. Earlier this year in March, I don't know, in March, April, there were 2 girls that purchased some gummies in the UK, and one of them died from a gummy, consuming a gummy. And what they found out in the autopsy is they were bought black market. They had no idea it was in it, and it turned out there was fentanyl in it. Fentanyl is the equivalent of taking a gun and loading bullets in all chambers except for one and playing Russian roulette. It's a very dangerous product, and it takes a very, very tiny amount to overdose on fentanyl. That's just a side note. So here we have the same part of that report, which is all blank over here. This one we put up as much for alert that it does not say certificate of analysis on it. In fact, this report, it looks pretty, but there's really no information. And then this is actually correct, this part here, but we just find it humorous. We have massage oil, and they're telling you how much it is per serving. It's not flavored massage oil, by the way, so it's not that type, but it just sort of humorous. But the main reason, it does not say certificate of analysis up there. So this is a good test report from a good laboratory, and this is what's concerning on this, is we looked at the photo over here, and there are these strange labels that are affixed, and we're like, well, what the heck are those? Went online and pulled up, and what it was is what the quantity is. This is a 200 or 2,000 milligram or 2 gram vape, and it's supposed to be Delta 10 THCO infused with HHC. And when we look down here, Delta 8 is extremely short. According to their advertising, 1,800 milligrams is supposed to be out of the 2,000. There's only 682. And then it says Delta 10. There's no Delta 10 detectable. It's non-detectable in this. So it's just knowing what you're getting. And I can tell you that if you think you're getting Delta 10 and THCO infused with HHC, and you actually only get Delta 8, which isn't even on there, your experiences would be different than what you're expecting with Delta 10 and THCO. Now we get to some ones that some lab reports that are sketchy at best. So first of all, Marin Analytics does what's called an analysis report, and we've talked to Marin Analytics. They do not issue a certificate of analysis as an official document of record for retail, because in California, where they're located, California charges, I believe it's $10 or $15 per test report, and they're decided that wasn't worth the expense. If you're looking, we're testing blue dreaming bloods. no clue what it is. There's no photo. There's no quantity of what the test was. There's nothing on there where it was tested, where it was picked up. All there is just basically somewhat of a potency report. And even then, there's no QR code. And then if this is Delta 8, when we looked into it, there are 203 milligrams. The product was labeled as 300 milligrams. So they're only giving you 2/3 of what you're supposed to be getting. And again, this is questionable. I'll just leave it at that. The other thing is, why do manufacturers only go to a potency test instead of why isn't it automatically a complete COA? The potency test is what's required by the government. A complete COA is what we insist on and what we feel it should be and what the FDA probably will be. The reason it's not done in most cases is it costs the manufacturer between $500 and $600 per batch. And it's strictly just a money thing. So they're taking that money instead of consumer safety as important. And what's really a sad state of affairs is right now, from our research and our contacts with manufacturers, only about 7% of manufacturers do have complete full panel COAs for all of the products. Here's another interesting one. So this was received as a Delta 8 THCP cartridge. So that's a vape cartridge. THCP is about 8 times stronger than Delta 9. So when someone's buying a THCP cartridge, they expect it to hit pretty hard. And the first thing is a note, they have the note over here that what it is, we notice that the testing company that it's being sold under, this must be run through a parent company because it is not the entity that is selling it. There is a bigger problem in that it's D8 and THCP. Well, there is some Delta 8. There is no trace of THCP in here. So they are totally doing a bait and switch on the consumer. And once again, this would be something that if someone has been using THCP when they try it, they're not going to be happy with that experience. Oh, and there's only, on top of that, there's only the cannabinoids on here. It does not test for any of the solvents or any of the other. This is far from a complete lab report. And I should have mentioned earlier, every one of these reports that we have here were provided to us when we did a product inquiry, and every single one of these manufacturers told us these were complete full panel COAs. So unfortunately, that's where it comes in. And then we come down to one of the worst reports that I have seen in a while, in that it has very little information on here. And unfortunately, this is probably from a brand name that everybody is familiar with if they are over 40. If we go back to the good old Cheech and Chong days and Up in Smoke movies, this is actually one of Tommy Chong's brands. And I don't know how involved he is in it, but here's a couple of things that are interesting. It doesn't have the company that it's being tested for on here at all. There's limited information on what's going on, but the manufacture date, it turns out they're not even manufacturing. What the repack means is they've purchased somebody else's product retail, not even wholesale, and repackaged it under the Tommy Chong brand. So you don't know where it's coming from, who made it, how it was made, or what it is, because the rest of the testing information on here doesn't tell you a whole heck of a lot. So even famous big brands can have a lack of testing. And we tried, because we're like, wait a minute, we like Tommy Chong, Cheech and Chong. I grew up with Cheech and Chong. I knew all about, the movies. We tried reaching out to them by email, by phone, and even posted on their website, and we have zero response from them when we asked them about getting a complete full panel COA. This is all they had. So that is that. So back to, how do I spot a fraudulent COA? Well, you could call all the labs, you could pull up the reports, you could try calling Bill Nye the Science Guy, because it's not magic, it's science. Or if anybody's interested, we will gladly look up any product from anywhere. And if you get us just what the product information is, we will tell you what is in it, what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. We can walk you through the report, or in some cases, we can say, hey, this is a great product. You should be using it for that. So with that, in fact, I'm going to stop on that side. Does anybody else have any, or does anybody have any questions? Does this make sense? Did
Yeah,
I go too
no,
fast?
you did great, Bill. This was so informative. I have a couple of questions, and then
Sure.
if other people have questions, just jump in too. So clearly, it sounds like every product you sell at Ethereal Gold Dispensary, you have a COA for. Is that correct?
More than just a COA. So what we do is we've established what we call the Ethereal Gold standard. And what that means is every product that we have online, every product that we have in the store, every batch has a complete full panel COA that you can either go on our website and actually click on that lab report and see the lab report, or you can go onto the product itself. In fact, I wonder if I have a, also should have brought a product along. I could have showed you one of the actual labels, and you can scan that QR code. In fact, we've shown customers when they come in the store, you know, or in the dispensary, get your smartphone out, you pop it up, and it pops up the test report. So that is something that we do. Unfortunately, at this time, we aren't carrying any Wisconsin manufacturers yet because we can't get full panel test reports out of them. We
Okay.
have partial COAs. We have testing for potency. Some do test some of their product, but not every single batch. There's also a manufacturer that I won't name that is a local that takes all of their products from different batches and different things, blends it all together and submits that for a test. But the challenge with that is if you would have 10 different, let's say 10 different gummies, and you have one gummy that is over, if they're blended with 9 gummies that are not, it doesn't show up on the test report. So we told them, I understand why you're doing that economically. We can't accept your product because we don't know for sure that that product, each one of those is correct because you're doing a blended approach.
Right. All right. Well, that's certainly reassuring for your customers, I can tell you. And then for the average consumer, let's say I go into a grocery store, they're selling, product there. So I just want to clarify this. Does every product have a QR code on it that should link to something, or do we just have to stand in the store and try and Google, what it is right there?
So every product should have a QR code on it.
Okay.
It should. Does every product? Unfortunately, no. If you're not sure, and if you're buying something at a grocery store and you're looking for something like maybe, let's say, a CBD gummy, and you look on the label and there's no QR code. Okay, that's sort of strike one. It's a concern. But look on what the ingredients are. If they do not have ingredients list, don't buy it. Even if they have an ingredients list, look in what the ingredients are. The number one ingredients should be whatever their carrier is and whatever the cannabinoid is. If it says hemp oil and there's no CBD or no CBG or whatever you're looking for, I would not buy it because you don't know what's in it.
Okay.
Oh, Amazon is another one. I forgot to mention Amazon. Amazon or Groupon have a ton of gummy companies. If you go through those, you should be able to look on the bottle, when you're spinning, when you're doing the 3D rotation, you should be able to see that QR code and that list of ingredients. If it's not there, don't buy it. It may be very cheap, may be very inexpensive, may taste good, but it probably won't do anything beneficial and it could even be negative.
Okay, this is so super helpful. I think too, I have given CBD products to my pets. I've given CBD products to my kids, and I never knew any of this before. The effect of that on their smaller bodies is going to be so much compounded. So I'm very
Well,
happy.
and then honestly, if you are giving CBD products to your pet, please make sure they are THC free, because after talking to about a dozen different veterinarians, it turns out that THC is not great for an animal's liver. So all the products for pets should be THC free. And then the recommendation is actually not to give CBD products to children or even young adults unless it is prescribed by a pediatrician, because while a child's brain is developing into the 20s, the endocrine system, which works with the cannabinoids, it also is developing. And there are some concerns in industry, in the medical industry, of what that might do to development. So I would just check with your pediatrician first, and then 100% I'd make sure that there's a full panel COA no matter what, because I never want to give my kids something that might have something unknown in.
Yeah. Excellent, excellent advice. Thank you. All right. What other questions do we have? Do any of you have, who are on the Zoom tonight, have some questions?
How effective are the topicals?
So there are topicals can be extremely effective. So there are balms, salves, roll-ons, and what you want to look for is, depending upon what you're looking for and for experience, or what the problem is, topicals can be very effective on sore muscles, on like restless leg syndrome. I know my wife uses it for restless leg syndrome with her knees when she has problem sleeping. But they are typically not as effective on joint pain.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you're looking, then that's something that, one thing that I should mention about just cannabinoids in general is every person has their own physiology and chemical makeup, and that cannabinoids are not any different than, for example, coffee. So, and I use coffee as an example because everybody sort of can relate to coffee. There are those of us that if you have a cup of coffee at 6 o'clock at night, we're ping pong balling around off the walls at 2 a.m. in the morning because caffeine affects us that way. Using my wife as example again, she can have a cup of coffee and a Diet Coke half an hour before she goes to bed and it doesn't affect her. So very similarly, cannabinoids will affect different people slightly differently. And that is something that when we're recommending, if you're starting with something, you want to try something, we always say, if it's an edible, start at a lower dosage. Another thing is, while we have some times, is depending upon what you're consuming, there is a lag of when it gets into your system. So the fastest way to get it into your system is by either vaping or smoking. For those of us that don't vape or smoke and prefer edibles, an edible can take anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours to get into your system. So we always recommend take a half dose first, wait a full 2 hours, and then see how it goes. And that can vary different, time to time, different people, even on how much you ate, when you ate last, and for example, how tired you are during the day. If you're really wiped out, sometimes it's like very similar to having a drink. If you have a drink of alcohol and after you've been really wiped out for the day, you can end up falling asleep on the couch, where there's other times where it may not even do much to you until you have 2 or 3. So very similar with cannabinoids, you want to always start with a lower dose, and then once you find out what works for you best, you can dial it in. For me, I'm pretty consistently an hour and 15 to hour and 30. Topicals, balms, etc., usually will work and interact within 10 to 15 minutes, 10 to 20, depends upon what the person. There also are things, some of the topicals do have, oh no, I'm blanking, blanking on the name. What's in Vicks Vapor Rub? Menthol. Some of them have menthol in it as a menthol based. So as long as you're not allergic to menthol, and the reason I bring that up is one of our guys is allergic to menthol, we found out. Menthol usually it helps that. Turmeric has been been talking to pharmacists, and they say the turmeric actually can help with that. And then there's also something called an entourage effect, where you could have like a Delta 8, 9, 10 mix. And what that does is it actually enhances the benefits of all 3 when you take that. So, but topicals usually should be a 10 to 15, and they can be very effective. My father's 85, and he's got diabetes and had several TIAs, and he has taken it, used it. I bought it for Father's Day actually for his shoulder, because he was having problems. He couldn't lift his arm up past shoulder height, and he put that on, and he goes, I couldn't believe it. Within 10 minutes, I could lift my shoulder or my arm over my head. And he goes, it wasn't like, boom, it was hot or something like that. It's just all of a sudden the pain was gone. I could move my shoulders. So depending upon what the symptom is, topicals can be very effective.
Thank
For
you.
everybody that participated, we do have a special code, Green Team 15. that if you go to our website, which is etherealgolddispensary.com, you get 15% off your online order, and we can either ship that directly to you, or you can do local pickup in Waukesha. Our address on the lower corner there. We're on Harrison and Grand, roughly, about 7 blocks north of Carroll University. And the other thing is, I'm going to drop an email address on the chat in the chat window here. And what you can do is, if you ever have any questions, you can either go on our website. We have a chat bot that'll answer majority of the questions. Otherwise, at any time, you can type in confidential at etherealgolddispensary.com. And if you have any type of question on CBD products, cannabinoids, dosing, if a COA is good, if a product is even good, our guys will gladly go through, and if it's a compliant issue, I'll turn it over to compliance director. But we'll go through and tell you what the honest third-party truth is, because if you're finding a product that works that you didn't get from us, that's not even a problem, because that might be something we might want to look into, because we're always looking for additional products and new products, because as I mentioned before, only about 7% of manufacturers have a full complete panel COA. And you're welcome.